So good afternoon to all the students and faculties present over here. I'm Adithya from 5th year BBA LLB, a member of Speak and also a co-host of this session. Before we begin this session, I would like to give a gist or a recap of yesterday's session, which was given by Harish Vashist. So he said that the intention was to assert dimensions of dialogues and how dialogues transform into various forms and categories of debates. The talk emphasized upon the nature and importance of language. Language as a tool and the insufficiencies in the nature of language with various diagrams also. It was to persuade the audience to learn the skills related to language and to make an attempt to define personal and societal problems to find a way to resolve them. He also tried to state that how people have language and language issues, and he was addressing how you have the thoughts in your mind but you are unable to express it. He gave a solution for every problems which you have been facing because of language. So that's the recap of yesterday's session. So today we'll begin with the session which is going to be handled by Mr. Adithya Nayak. So I will hand over the proceedings to him.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. So allow me a moment to share my screen and then we shall begin.
Okay.
Right. Hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is Aditya.
Thank you. So I'd start with greetings to one and all. Good afternoon. And today we are here on another session of Debating 101, which is regarding journey of an opinion from disturbance to dialogue, which will be handled by me, that is Adithya Nayak. So as Harish Bhaiya started his session yesterday with a small anecdote, even I have something to reminiscence. So about 8 years from today and 8 years and a month from today, that is when I started my debating career. And it's pretty insignificant when compared to the previous story. And I started my debating career in an intra debate that was held within my institution. And the topic was regarding whether formal education in India is a viable way of learning things. So with that, I started my debate. But one common thing that I can firmly establish is that the very first time I started debating, and right now, one thing that remains the same is that my hands tremble every time I go to the podium. And my hands tremble worse when once you're an established debater and someone asks your opinion on a particular topic which is of public importance. And I think that some things remain the same over time. And until you get the flow or the heck of it, you just got to do what you got to do. So with that, we begin our session regarding the journey of an opinion from disturbance to dialogue. And how are we going to go about it? We are going to learn what an opinion is. So we absolutely put very little efforts into the slides. This is the product of about an hour or two of all the hard work that I'd call it. So let's understand what an opinion means according to the internet meaning of it. So according to the internet, an opinion means a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. And secondly, a statement of advice by an expert on on a particular professional matter. Just give me a second. I think so. Is trying to contact me. Okay. So statement of advice by an expert on a professional matter. Now, the common thing between these two is that both are statements made on a particular subject. Now, it could not be a fact or a piece of knowledge, but the similarity remains the same, that it is on a particular subject. Now, if we further learn as to why do we have to provide our opinion on a particular topic, as to who gives us the right. And as law students, often we look at the legal side of it as to what gives us the right. And in India, we have the Constitution of India, and at the international level, we have the UDHR, that's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So the pretext or the premise on which this session would be set up is that we need to understand as to why should we provide an opinion on a particular matter when called for. And opinion is not necessarily called for, and that is the beauty of it. So it's not necessary that someone asks you your opinion on a particular topic. You can, in your individuality, cite what you feel about a particular subject. It could be a point of law, it could be something related to politics or economics. You have a right to opinionate on it. Now, if we further learn Article 19 of the UDHR and Article 19, Clause 1 of the Indian Constitution, both guarantee the same right, that is, the right to opine or the right to express. And I think it is also a part of natural justice, natural rights, that by birth we have the right to express as a stimuli or stimulus to an event, a situation, or maybe an object. So based on that, we human beings are conditioned to basically react to any particular situation. So if anyone's raising their hands, I'd be addressing all the questions at the end of the session so that the flow is maintained. So this is about our legal right. So we have the right to opinionate. We have the right to opinionate at the international level or at the national level. So what is all this chaos about? I think about the past few weeks, if you guys are law students who read the judgments or the cases that are surfacing in the Supreme Court, you must have heard that there's a lot of hustle and bustle going regarding the right to provide your opinion or the right to express. And I think we can trace it back to two things. That's the bigger picture. We do have a right to opinionate on topics, but at the same time, there are reasonable restrictions that are also placed so that we do not make an unreasonable use of our rights. Because when we have a right, we also have a duty to respect another's rights as well. And that's the reason why there are certain reasonable restrictions that are placed on us and that will be enforced by the state in its rightful sense. But there is another part to this bigger picture as I identify it, because it's necessary for me as a debater to also show two sides of a topic, especially when I'm trying to address an audience of debaters. So the second part of the bigger picture would be the status of dissent in our country. So it is often accused that the state is often suppressing dissent or oppressing those who try to raise their voice against the state and the establishment. And that is why we've had a wide range of talks, even at the global level. We have a lot of agencies at the global level citing violations of human rights, or violations of the right to speech in India, or the right to express in India. And these are a few articles that cite the same. However, we also need to understand, let's forget all the status quo for now. Let's forget regarding the rights. Let's forget regarding the duties. Let's just trace the journey of opinion in itself before escalating into the current scenario and how you could possibly opinionate or put your opinion out in public. Now, if you look at history, this is how I would like to analyze how opinion decentralized. Yes, I repeat, opinion decentralized. So if you look at the 18th century or even before that, or start from 12th century, when we had a range of philosophers coming into the picture, talking about natural justice, talking about the role of a state, talking about uh, is law required in society or not. So a wide range of questions were being raised and a wide range of opinions were being made. And these opinions were successful because the right to opinionate was necessarily, at least the right to opinionate on the public domain was necessarily centralized or concentrated within certain individuals who were the best in the field, or let's say maybe they had a knowledge of most of the fields or human behavior for that matter, which almost covered most of the fields. So that is the reason why over the years, the right to opinionate, especially to place your opinion on the public domain, has decentralized at a rapid rate. If you look at the 18th century, we had people like David Hume, Adam Smith, Thomas Hobbes, everyone's heard of them, Jefferson. And then further we go to the 19th century, we have John Stuart Mill, we have Tolstoy, we have William James. And let's go further to the 20th century. So we still had people who are the best in their field. For example, we had Einstein and Curie in science, in the field of science, and we had John Keynes in the field of economics. Now let's go further, about a century or 75 years from then. We have the advent of the 21st century. So these are stock images. They're not, maybe or may not be professionals. But then what is to be stated is that at the advent of the 20th century, we believed that people like who are professionals in their field, not the best, but professionals in their field. So we had people like doctors, lawyers giving their opinions regarding relevant topics, if at all an opinion is called for. Excuse me, ma'am, is there a disturbance in the background?
I swear, sir, can we have you look into it?
Right. So let's continue. So I was saying that we had, yeah. So we had the right to opinionate or put your opinion on the decentralized to professionals in their field from the best in their field. So we had it further decentralized to people who are professionals, like you would go for opinions or advice to a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer or an architect for that matter, with respect to their own fields. And this is the better part of the 21st century, because the next part, as we all know, just give me a second. Yes. So this is after internet was made cheap, and this is the 21st century that we know, where each and every person has an opinion. And rightly so, everyone has their opinion, but until this time, not everyone had the opportunity to put their opinion on the public domain. Like, for example, Twitter or even create their own blog sites. Now, the number of blog sites that you have, it's quite a lot. It's running in millions when compared to what it was prior to 2015 or 2014, only with respect to India. So these are the opinions as you look at your screen with no reference to any particular individual. These are the opinions that you're exposed to in the current scenario. And these might or might not be the best in their field. However, even being best in their field does not guarantee a constructive opinion in the current scenario, which is why the first 15 minutes of this session was very important to be conducted so that we can abridge what is the better opinion for you and not is what a good opinion or what a bad opinion is, right? And I'm not blaming people because I'm not saying that I wasn't a part of this multitude who presented their opinion on domains like social media. It includes me. But then this can only be a part of our session where we can have probably a talk on a lighter note about this. So we can go on playing the blame game, saying that you said something, I said something, I had a constructive opinion, you did not. But that does not rule out that everyone has a right to opinionate, be it in the public domain or in private. So that is why what are the key takeaways from the 15 minutes of the initial 15 minutes of of this discussion is that there is widespread misinformation, especially in the 21st century. And I'm talking about the second part and not the first part. And obviously there's misinterpretation of law as well. Now, people read law prima facie, they read it at the surface level and they interpret it into something else or something especially in their favor. And further, we have erroneous interpretation of history. Needless to say, we have WhatsApp forwards. So people have left or knocked out religious books out of their houses, and now they have WhatsApp forwards as their reliable sources. And then we have unreliable sources of mass media. I need not touch upon it. I think it's already there. And the past few months have taught us a lot more about it than ever before. And then we have uninformed, unlettered, excluded multitude. Now, this is something we need not be and we should not be. We should strive to stay away from this particular group. Not because we have to socially exclude them, but because the more uninformed we are, the more unlettered or the more excluded we stay from the society, that we do not wish to engage in any discussion, the more gullible we are when anyone dictates something. So tomorrow, if I come and tell you that I have a piece of fact, which is in my interest and you should accept it, you will accept it if you're uninformed and you have no information regarding the subject whatsoever. So that is one of the conclusions that we can derive. And lastly, this is the most important part of, or this is the most important takeaway according to me. This is the need to understand the right to reserve one's opinion. So if you have an opinion, it is not necessary that you impose it on another person. So you can keep your opinion to yourself and you can still be friends. However, the moment you try to impose it on another person, that is when you hurt friendships, relationships, or sometimes even friction within the family. This happens a lot of time. So these are the key takeaways, according to me, in the current sphere of opinionating in public, especially in the public domain. It could be social media, and now it has further escalated to even anywhere in public. Even if you're standing in a market and you foul mouth a particular person having a certain level of influence, you might invite some harm, physical or mental. So these were the key takeaways, and these are the questions that we have to mull over before we can proceed to the rest of the slides. So is there a good or a bad opinion, or is there a superior or inferior opinion based on if it's coming from a professional or if it's coming from a common man? And do we have an innovative or obsolete opinion? Now, innovative and obsolete opinion, a common example would be a few years ago, movies like Gangs of Wasepur or movies like even TV shows lately, like Sacred Games or Mirzapur, would be termed to be obscene or would be termed to be something that hurts the sentiments of a lot of people. And they were always not given the certificates, or a lot of cuts were made before they were released out. But then the opinion has further changed. It has almost changed completely, about 75% definitely. Because now the point of view of people has changed regarding such movies. They call it art films now. They call it movies that have a certain message or which replicate true human emotions. So that is where I'm trying to draw a line between an innovative and obsolete opinion. Further, what are the common subjects to opine on? On what you can have an opinion on? Politics, economics, matters of social importance, public policy, relevance of a sovereign, science, schools of thoughts via their ideologies, and an abstract realm. I believe that even Harish drew some references to abstract ideas or abstract topics in his talk yesterday. So these are the topics that you can have an opinion on. This is a general analysis. Anyone can have an opinion on this. But then the session is called Debating 101, and we are not actually having a session on Article 19. So let's proceed to common subjects to opine on. That's the perspective of a debater. And the slide is empty because a debater can learn or condition themselves to debate on literally any topic. It could be as trivial as a talk show on television, or it could be as trivial as even a character in that talk show. So people do have debates on literally everything. And what is debating, and what is the difference between giving an opinion and stating an argument? So that is going to be discussed in the next slide. Your opinion is something that should be merely declarative. I believe that so and so is the best actor in Bollywood. I believe, and it ends there. That is where we call it to be something declarative. It's merely a statement. However, argument is something that is assertive in nature. What is assertive is basically you have an opinion on a particular subject and you want it to be proven as something that is superior or something that is better or more viable than the other opinion. There is a difference between giving an opinion, merely giving an opinion, and making an argument. Now, when you have an opinion and when you add exigency or demand, you demand the other party that this is the better course of action. That is when it becomes an argument. And this is just a normal structuring of an argument. Further slides, you have a better structure, but this is how I understand it to be. So you have an opinion, and where you add exigency or you demand the other person or the listener to accept that yours is the superior one, that is when it becomes an argument. Further, a debater does not debate on subjects. We have something called as motions or propositions. And there can be a variety of motions and propositions, especially in debating when you talk about an academic simulation that you hold in different law universities or colleges, or any college for that matter. If you have debates, you have mainly two types of propositions. One is a value-based proposition, and second is a policy-based proposition. And the approaches to each proposition vary from one another. The reason being that both of them are, the end outcome and the means of achieving the end outcome is different. And your whole approach towards the problem should also be different. In addition to this, we also have a fact-based proposition, but that is not something that is widely regarded as something that has to be included in an academic simulation. So let it be. So we'll discuss about value-based propositions and policy-based propositions and how to approach each one of them. When we talk about a value-based proposition, what is the objective? What is the end outcome? What do you want to achieve in a value-based proposition? You want to convince a third person or a moderator as to why is the case laid down by the respective side stronger or better. What are the means through which you will achieve it? By explaining the concept and the nitty-gritties associated. So you have a particular concept. You have to make sure that you portray that you know what you're talking about first. And only then the listener will continue listening to you, because in the initial phase itself, if you convince the listener that you have very little knowledge or you're quite new to talk on the particular topic, then he will rule the rest of your speech out. So first you have to explain the concept and all the nitty-gritties associated with it. And secondly, you have to cite certain examples as to why your side is strong by citing examples from the past and present where your side has been viable. So you have to state certain examples of already established facts. So that adds a great level of persuasive value to your arguments, because that event has already occurred or the object has already worked in the past and it is also working in the present, which means that it is obviously a viable option when compared to the other option available. And that is why you have to cite certain examples. Even citing examples as I'm talking to you, citing examples becomes important. And one of the examples that I'd like to cite, based on which you can listen to rest of the points, is that are offline classes better or are online classes better? If you talk about offline classes, you have experienced them before, and you do have a chance to even experience it right now, given certain conditions or the pandemic guidelines, but you do still have a chance. And at the same time, you also experienced online classes. Now, if you draw a comparison between the two, which one works better for the wider multitude? That is what you have to prove. To prove that, you will have to take or cite certain examples or maybe certain stats where how students are scoring in offline exams or online exams. You'll maybe have to take certain assumptions, but that's all part of making an argument. So that is the second point. You'll have to cite certain examples from the past and present. And then you'll have to compare both sides and successfully persuade as to why yours is better by complementing your assertions with legitimate instances where your side was picked over the other. Now, this becomes the main part, and this is quite hard to find, where one side has been chosen over another by a legitimate authority, or that instance should be legitimate. So it should be mostly an established fact and not merely what you are speculating. Now, if you say that a particular college has chosen offline classes over online classes, you need to be damn sure about what you're talking about, what age group you're talking about, what subject you're talking about, and whether that has actually occurred or this is something that you found on WhatsApp. So that is what you have to be very sure about. Further, making a convincing concluding statement, maintaining your stance on the topic without any deviation. And this is also an important part. Never end any argument by saying that both are sides of the same coin. That's the worst argument to make in your set of arguments. Never say that both are sides of the same coin, because that makes, or your whole argument can be ruled out with just one statement. You'll bring them both at the same level while the moderator is valuing your sides. So that statement is never to be made, and at the same time, do not even try supporting the other side. You start your statement by saying that I support this motion or I go for or against this motion, and then you proceed everything on line of whichever side you're on. You never make a deviation. You make a deviation, you lose the debate. That's all. And examples I've already cited. One, are offline classes better than online classes? And then the second example, probably you'll come across this either in your first year or years to come, or you can even make an initiative at learning this. So is a presidential system of government better than a parliamentary system? So even this is a value-based proposition, because we are trying to assess as to which object or which concept or mechanism gives us a better value than the other. So that is the approach that you need to have when you approach a value-based proposition. Secondly, when you're approaching a policy-based proposition, policy-based proposition is simple ways. What is a policy? Policy is basically some kind of action that you're making, or it is an outcome of a plan, or maybe a more comprehensive plan. That is what you call as a policy. And in debating, if you have to speak in a general sense, it's a course of action. So which way are you going to take in order to proceed further? So to prove why your course of action is viable, efficient, and foolproof is the objective of a policy-based proposition. When you're approaching it, that should be your end outcome. That you need to prove as to why your side is viable, efficient, maybe feasible, and foolproof. So what are the means that you will probably adopt in order to further this idea? Now I'll take one example and then relate all the points to it. So the first example would be, is capital punishment better than life imprisonment? This is a topic that is used in each and every generic debating, conventional debating simulation. So choosing which one is a better course of action so that the outcome is different. So whether people are going, the crime rate is going to come down if capital punishment is imposed, or whether life imprisonment is effective in that aspect. So the means, first you have to explain what the basic doctrine is that connects both the courses of action. Now, if you look at capital punishment and life imprisonment, they are connected by a basic doctrine, and that is, what is the punishment that a person shall be given if he has committed a crime of a certain degree? That is the doctrine that binds both the courses of action. That is from where it stems. And then what the first course of action has to offer, that is what your course of action has to offer, and then what the second course of action has to offer. So that we know that even if both of them are quite similar and both of them are equally effective, we need to know what are the features of both, so that it gives even the moderator a better perspective if the other party has been unsuccessful in explaining the concept thoroughly. And then this is important. Here you have to stress, this is subject to individual discretion. So you'll have to stress on the merits that the first course of action has to offer and that the other lacks or deficient in. Because this is where you attack on the spine of the other course of action. So you'll have to show why this is better than the other, because the other side is deficient in this part and this side has to offer it, right? So that is what you will have to prove to the moderator, that this course of action is better, by attacking on what the other side is deficient or it lacks. And the concluding remarks to concrete your stance, similarly to the previous one, you should not have any statement of deviation. And at the same time, do not play the statement of two sides of the same coin. You stick to your statement, you say that this is the only course of action available and this is the best course of action. So that is what we can conclude from the second slide regarding the approach to a policy-based proposition. Further, as we talk about an argument is the means of communicating to a moderator, and it's the only means by which you win a debate. You might even have rebuttals, but this forms the majority of the chunk on which you are going to be scored on. So that is why you need to make it as substantive and as crisp and valuable as possible. Each and every statement should mean something, and it should not distract the moderator from your main point or not bore the moderator. So you need to make sure that whatever you're speaking, it is relevant. So the first thing that you need to be proficient with whenever you're approaching any kind of problem, it could be related to politics, law, or economics, you need to know the technicalities of the subject. And these are range from scientific, legal, economical, whatever technicalities about marginal utility in economics, maybe regarding a particular article or section or a particular doctrine or precedent in case of law. And in science, maybe certain principles, I don't know, Faraday, whatever. So the technicalities you need to be well versed with, so that the other person gets to know that you know stuff over here. The more you show the other person that you might not be aware, the more if you leave that lacunae or that space where the other person can question you regarding it, and then further he can get to know that you're not completely aware of it. You need to not use such statements. So make sure that you're accustomed with the technicalities of the subject before approaching it with your other arguments. So technicalities forms the foundation. Then we proceed to the logic, the feasibility, the viability, and the realistic application. Suppose we are having a debate as to which is the better course of action to probably further online education to the underprivileged. So if you're making a statement saying that we will distribute free phones to everyone in public, all the children who live in slums, how are you going to distribute those free phones? What is going to be the basis of those of the distribution? To whom are you going to distribute? What age group? And at the same time, on the basis of what merits are you going to distribute? And also, what is the guarantee that the child is going to use it for that particular purpose? After all, it's a privilege to have a mobile phone. So how are you going to answer all of these if questions are forced on you? Now you have to make sure that your statements are logically flexible so that you are aware what you're talking about, and if a person makes a statement, you are able to counter it without any hassle. The more hassle you create, the more you're falling into the well, and those are nails on your coffin. Every time you stutter, you're done. So your logic, your feasibility of a particular idea that you propose in the debate or in your argument, viability and the realistic application. Is it possible that a person can actually apply it, and would it be feasible if it is applied? That needs to be answered. And the merits of your side and the upper hand over the opposition. Now, each and every side will have its own merits. But what are the merits that a side has over the opposition? That is important. Because I'm not interested in knowing that you have a good product, but I'm interested in knowing what your product has to offer that the other product does not offer. That is the important point, and that is the unique selling point, right? That's the USP of your arguments. And that is what is required while you argue as well. You need to target the spine of the other side's arguments. And that is when the other side is demolished. And you create a good argument, a standing argument for yourself. And last tool, but the most important tool, is the tool of persuasion. Now, the tool of persuasion is multifaceted. We are going to have a discussion regarding it in the next slide. And I call it the differentiator. Now, I've seen a lot of debaters over a span of so many years that they are quite great with research, quite great with spending late, not sleeping at night and spending hours together on research, piling up pages of research, adding those tags and coming to debates, and maybe thinking that on the basis of knowledge, they will be able to completely demolish the opposition. Now, I'm not undermining the idea. I say that it is a good idea. It's not bad. And certainly, people should be well researched whenever they are going to a particular debate or whenever they are approaching a particular topic. It could be a debate, it could be a moot. But then at times, that doesn't matter. So you might research pages together, or you might research about 4 or 5 good pages. At the end, the other person might win just because of this key differentiator, that is the persuasion. So for this you might not be able to master in your first few debates. It could be your first few debates or moots. In moots, especially, persuasion becomes one important tool. But if I just talk about conventional debates, persuasion is equally important. But that might not be easy for you to master in your very first few debates, because you might not be that comfortable in having a conversation with the moderator, and that is the tool over there. So that is the bridge. So you basically build a bridge, you basically build a conversation with you and the moderator, and then you slide in these persuasive statements. These are not statements of fact, these are not statements of law. These are merely statements that push your arguments up, right? That gives it the extra push, and that also that amplifies your argument basically. So if I am a moderator, what am I basically looking at? I'm basically looking at an argument that is able to successfully deliver its point and able to satisfy what I'm looking forward to. And once I'm satisfied, that's done, because I'm going to decide the awards at the end of the day. So the end object is the same, in order to satisfy the moderator with your arguments. And how do you do it? That is through persuasion. So if you keep on stating facts, it will make no sense. You might have tons of research, you might know a lot of laws, but you don't know how to effectively build a conversation with the judges, then all your information goes into vain. So here are a few things that I find, or I can identify in the skill of persuasion. First is the confidence. Now you might be stating a fact, or you might be merely stating an assertion. The confidence matters, because once you are pushed off that off your confident or your comfortable seat, that is when your true debater actually comes out. So you will have to convince the other person that you actually know, while the other person is trying to make his best attempt at trying to demolish your confidence, and confidence becomes the strongest pillar in that context while you're persuading another person. Generous use of positive statements. Now, this is important, and you refrain from using anything negative or anything sarcastic or anything not meant to be parliamentary language, because that will bring down the character of a debater in front of the moderator. So that is why you need to use as many positive statements as possible and depict yourself as a nice person, which you might not be in private. And then avoiding switching sides and sticking to your stance. Why is this important? I've already stated this. Never deviate from what you originally said. If you deviate, then that is a question in itself. Avoiding logical and factual policies related to the subject in matter of the argument. Logical and factual, it's actually not policies, it's fallacies, factual fallacies and inaccuracies related to the subject and matter of the argument. Why? Because if you are not well researched and you're relying on some things that you might have read, you don't remember the source, you don't remember the person who told you, but you just remember this piece of fact and it's roaming in your brain, and then you deplore it while you're debating. That is when you'll be in a huge mess, because once you are questioned on it, you cannot persuade on a matter of something that is false, right? So if it's a well-established fact that whatever you're saying is false, then there's no use of persuasion. Persuasion will not work in that case. So make sure that your logical and factual statements are intact in your speech and not meddled with at any point. And then avoiding pauses if questioned on a point of fact or logic. A lot of people still don't notice it. It might be people who are debating for years. But the moment if a question is being asked and you make these pauses or you try stuttering, you look down, you look up, and then you answer, that clearly indicates that you don't know. Or maybe you know, but you don't know the complete part or the complete picture. So that is why it is necessary to avoid pauses. The more immediate you reply to a particular question raised by the moderator, the more effective it is. So that is why avoiding pauses is necessary. I'm not saying that you don't take pauses at all. Some pauses are necessary so that a person gets enough time, enough breathe time to process all the information. But then a lot of pauses, especially when you're questioned, then that gives a sign otherwise, which is not favorable to you. Being respectful to the moderator and the opposition at all times. So the more sarcastic you get, the more disrespectful you get towards your opposition, however, whoever they may be, that puts you down to some extent. You might be a great debater, but then if you don't have the basic ethics or the parliamentary habit, then it defeats the purpose why you're debating. You're debating to establish a point. But then in the course of establishing a point, if you take methods which are not considered to be good methods, then it defeats the object. So that was how persuasion or the skill of persuading is a differentiator for debaters. Proceeding to structuring your arguments. That's a funnel, and you see three elements. We have logic, facts, and persuasion. Persuasion would form about 15%, whereas logic would be the most of it. Even your factual argument should be logically right, because if they're not logically right, they're not factual at all. And all the statements, whatever you make, if it's logical, realistic, feasible, viable, it's going to make a good argument. So I would allot about 60% to logic, 15% to persuasion, that's 75%, and 25% to facts. Because not a lot of people want your speech to be very wordy. They don't want the percentages, the stats in a lot of quantum. Maybe they want it, but not in a huge amount, because the more facts you deliver, the more you deviate from your point. What's the point? Like, it's available on the public domain. Everyone knows that. But what do you derive from those facts? That is important. So we have logic, facts, and persuasion all funneled together makes a constructive argument. Next. Effective rebuttals or refutations. Now we know how to debate, we know how to structure an argument. Just a second. Yes. So we know how to rebut, we know how to make an effective, we know how to make an effective argument. So how we need to learn how to rebut. Making an effective argument is considerably easy than answering to a rebuttal. The reason being that a lot of people do this. They can write stuff down, they can stand in front of the mirror, they can by heart the whole speech. But when the other side manages to find a lacunae in your speech, that is when they are in shambles. And a person who is a good debater is not just a good orator, but at the same time, he also tries to make his statements as foolproof as possible. By foolproof, I don't mean that it should be 100% factually right and 100% persuasive in nature. By foolproof, leaving no scope for questions or any kind of rebuttals. So the more foolproof you make, the more effective you make your arguments and the lesser questions that are posed at you. But even then, if there are questions that are posed, even if your arguments are 100% foolproof, that is when the questions might be vague and it might be dismissed by the moderator then and there. That gives you an advantage. So what should you do while you are posing a rebuttal to the other party? You need to target the backbone of the opposition's argument, as said before. You need to pick on the spine. So what is the basis on which their argument is based? If you manage to break it down, then that's it. That's game over for the opposition. Second of all, you have to pick out the most lethargic, vague argument made by the opposition. Now, just like each and every debater, once upon a time, each and every debater has this experience where they state something what they don't actually know of in a statement or an argument. They might have heard the word, they might have heard the application to some 10-15%, but they don't know the whole concept, and they state it lethargically in the sense it might not be that convincing to anyone who hears it. So if you target that particular point, that becomes the weak spot. It's not the spine, but it's the weak spot of the opposition. So if you target that particular part, then the other person might be in shambles, and it is his turn to sweat at that point of time if you target the weak point. So that is why you have to pick out the most lethargic and vague argument. For example, a person is making a statement to me saying that I'm going to build a Mars rover. I have made the design and it's going to be ready in 15 days. So you see how not convincing this particular statement is, because he says the time limit as 15 days and he says that he's going to build a Mars rover. And this is almost on multiple grounds, logically, factually, and even on the feasibility test. This fails all of them. And that is why this becomes a vague argument to be made, right? So you have to pick these out and then you have to attack it in a sustainable manner. And then should be on the lookout for factual inaccuracies and logical inconsistencies. So once you have made your speech, it is not that you have finished your job. So as much as it's the duty of the speaker to make his own argument, it's also the duty of the speaker or the debater to listen another person's argument, because that is where it matters. If you don't know what the other person is arguing for, you will be going for the wrong point. If I'm arguing on a point of law and if you are arguing on a point of fact, both are two different things and both are two different domains. So if you don't know the domain or the playground on which you are actually playing, then there's no point, there's no game. You are in two different playgrounds. So that is why it's necessary, why you have to listen to the other person and then check for any logical or factual inaccuracies in their statement. And that gets you points, obviously. Prioritize the set of questions based on effectiveness. You might have 10 to 15 questions to ask to a particular person. You might find everything to be wrong in a particular person's speech. But then what is the weakest spot, or what actually attacks the spine and demolishes the other side? That becomes the most effective question, or that becomes the most powerful question. And therefore you need to have an order of priority on which, based on which you're going to ask, because you're not going to get the whole day to just ask questions. You need to reserve certain time to ask questions or rebuttals, and within that time you need to accommodate questions. So if you are running on paucity of time, you need to choose the best questions that you have so that your argument comes out the best. And therefore it's also necessary that you prioritize which question to ask and which not. Some questions can wait. quote the oppositions while pointing out fallacies. So if I'm making a statement that the opposition stated, and I quote, that adds to the effectivity of a debater, especially in his listening skills, because the other person was attentive throughout the debate, and that shows how engaged he was to the simulation. If the other person is raising vague questions by hearing one random statements, then and there, the moderator will get to know that this person was not listening to the whole speech. So a lot of people have those habits. They listen to half of the statement made and then go on asking questions as if it's a privilege. That is why if you quote the opposition while pointing out fallacies, you'll always be in the good books of the moderator. Further, the basis of substantive reasoning, constructive criticism, reading the complete fact. This is always important, reading the complete fact. So if you are researching tomorrow, maybe let's take something less controversial. There are a lot of controversial things in the public domain right now. So let's talk about, okay, let's say abrogation of Article 370. So when you're talking about a topic like this, you might be talking about some other allied topics like maybe the instrument of accession, maybe the history of Indian independence, maybe how Jammu and Kashmir was given a special status back then. So there are certain facts, certain points of history, or maybe some anecdotes from history, which lead to this particular fact. And it is not necessary that whatever you find even on the internet or even in particular books, they might be legitimate. So often what the writer does, they write that it is a personal account, or it is in the point of view or in the eyes of this particular person, that this particular person saw this in this particular perspective. And it's quite dangerous to take a perspective as a fact in most of the cases. So whenever you're talking about a particular situation, examine or see the bigger picture. The more you miss out on the bigger picture and confine yourself to whatever benefits you, you might be in trouble because you made the statement and a question is raised on the contrary and you're not aware of it. And that is why it is important that you read the complete fact. In the course of reading the complete fact, from where do you read it? That is important. It should be a legitimate source. What is a legitimate source? That is subjective in the current scenario, considering that everyone doubts everything. It might be a statutory body, it might be a media agency, it might even be the government. Everything is doubted these days. And therefore, it is always important. You can compare a lot of sources, and whatever you find in common, maybe you can take that as legitimate. That is a suggestion that I can provide in order to verify legitimate sources. And then reading the history, status quo, and contemporary relevance. I say that you don't go much into the history of a particular topic, because if you go into the history is interpreted different by different people, and they interpret it according to their needs. So history has become as subjective as any other activistic topics in the current scenario. So you have history to be debated, and which is something that has already occurred and established in the past. We are debating on that at this point of time. So it's I just suggest that you stay away a bit from the history. Don't base your arguments on history or past facts. Then status quo, of course, what is currently happening, and the contemporary relevance as to why is this important right now? What is the recent developments that have come into the picture? Why are we debating on this? Basically that. Reading developments is very important. So they passed a legislation about a week or two ago, and you probably just read that, and then you didn't read that it got repealed, then you might be in trouble. Because if you apply that law when it has been repealed, then it's not effective, it's null and void. Similarly, even judgments. So if you're using certain judgments in your statements or your arguments, and you haven't read that that particular judgment has been overruled, you are at an equal trouble, just like referring to a repealed legislation. So that is why reading developments and keeping yourself updated is very important while reading the complete fact. Avoiding speculations, unbaked or uncooked facts. So a mere speculation that this particular country might be behind a particular pandemic without actually establishing facts, or maybe this particular country might wage a war on this particular country on some day, merely on speculations or merely on certain Twitter threads. That's not what a debater should do, or what a responsible debater should do, I'd say. So avoid these speculations, unbaked facts or uncooked facts. So if a particular person or if a particular media agency has said that it is speculated that this person might have died because someone committed murder, then that is a speculation. Until a fact has been established by a certain agency, which is supposed to do investigation and not the media, do not take or accept such facts. They are uncooked, they are unbaked, they are mere speculations. Next, majority reliance on logical reasoning. So you'll have to rely a lot on logical reasoning. People might have their interpretations of history or the present or even a particular thing. For example, a particular note has a particular chip in it, or a particular app works on certain Bluetooth or some other mechanisms. Now, what happens with these? You need to use certain logic or you have to research into it, whether it's logically possible to do this or not, whether it's tested or not. So only when you use your own logical test, even if the facts are wrong on paper, you'll be able to understand what is best for you. So apply this logical test each and every time you're approaching a particular statement of fact particularly, statement of law is established. And then lastly, testing the opinion or critique for fallacies and loopholes. So you might have formulated an opinion, you might have formulated a statement of argument, but until and unless you test it, whether this is foolproof. So even if I put it in the public domain, what are the potential comments or questions that I might be expecting? Or even if it is put in a debating forum, what are the questions or rebuttals that I might be expecting? You have to keep both of them in mind. And then you make a solid opinion or a foolproof, or what we see as a constructive opinion. So that is the last ingredient or the basis for substantive reasoning or constructive criticism. That is testing the opinion and critique before actually letting it out in the public domain. You can keep it to yourself, but when you're putting it out, you need to make sure that it's 100% foolproof. And then also, considering that the session was going a bit too serious, those kids, they are totally not related to this particular slide. They're just there for the good vibes, I'd say. So what are the good habits that a debater has to imbibe? And these are from back page of a moral science textbook, best. And some are my own inputs. So what are the good habits that a debater must imbibe? First of all, learn to be comfortable with your voice. Now, this sounds pretty vague and this sounds pretty unrealistic. I think all of us have experienced this, that when we hear a recording of our voice and when we are speaking, two are absolutely different. You don't like to listen to the recordings of your voice. So first you have to get accustomed to that, listening to your own voice, because when you go to debates, you might or might not use mics. And when you use mics, what you hear in your recorded audio, that is what comes out of a mic. And that is why it's necessary that you get accustomed to your voice, because once you use a mic and then you find that your voice is a bit too weird and you're not that comfortable with making continuous statements in a flow, you might have great arguments, but you might fumble. So that is why you have to learn to be comfortable with your voice. Secondly, have a reading habit. Not saying that you have to read big books. You can read books which range up to 100 pages. You can read books by Kafka or any author, whichever you like, but with good English and good enunciation. So what does a reading habit help with? It helps you with sentence construction, how to formulate a good statement, using the right words to articulate. Now, a lot of people, they don't find the good words whenever they want to make a statement, but they don't find the right words at that point of time. So they either do two things. First, they wait until they remember the right word, which wastes a lot of time, speaker time. And the second is that they use the wrong word, which changes the whole meaning of the sentence and invites a lot of difficulties. So that is why it is always recommended that you use the right words in order to articulate it. And that can only be possible if you have a good reading habit. And even if you listen to good speakers, I think it helps with that. What you should avoid: excessive exaggerations. Now you might be completely impressed about a particular topic, for the positive or the negative. You might be impressed or you might want to outrage at a particular topic, but the way that you present it, it should be as diplomatic as possible. The more that you express through your words, the more weird the argument seems and unnatural. It might be right, the words might be right, the exaggeration might be right for you, but then when you're putting it outside, it portrays not about your debating skills, but about you as a person, as to how you react to certain situations. So if you keep or use your words as diplomatically as possible, I think that helps you with maintaining a good image and maintaining a satisfactory image as a person as well. Because in your mind, you might absolutely hate a particular decision or probably love a particular decision, but you need to keep some things to yourself. And when you're portraying it outside on a public forum, it should be something else. That is why avoid excessive exaggerations. Usage of words whose meaning you aren't completely aware of. You read something on the newspaper today and it sounds really good, and you want to use it in a speech or in an argument. That is not something that is quite recommended. Reasons being that you might not be able to assess the scope and the usage of that particular word. Now, it might be used in this particular context, but it might be also applicable in another context, and it might have a different meaning there. And that is where you might end up in a trouble. So you need to avoid using words that you don't know of. My tips that if you want to improve your language and if you want to show that you have a great vocabulary, I suggest that first you use those words in usual conversations, the day-to-day conversations. Try using it with people. See how they react. Get comfortable with it. And only then you comfortably put that word or insert that word in your speech when you're making it in front of a public forum. And that is where you'll do well by using words which you wish to use. And now you also are aware of how it is used. The third point, accents that you are not uncomfortable with. A lot of debaters, they get influenced by accents. If they go to these international schools or they go to these international debates, you meet a lot of people who carry certain accents. That accents could be because of their origin, or it could be because of something that they voluntarily wanted to have or imbibe. I mean, it's not a bad thing that you want to incorporate a certain accent in your speech. It's certainly a good thing. You might want to explore how you speak a particular language. But then, if you're not comfortable with the accent, if say one part of the sentence you're able to successfully state in that particular accent, whereas the other part, the Indian in you is coming out, uh, that does not talk about, I mean, it would totally undermine the legitimacy of your speech. So people would be more amused not by your points, but the way you're talking. And that should not be the end objective. The end objective is to establish a point and not just amuse people with how you speak. And unsolicited pauses. So, yeah, unsolicited pauses is again like there are certain pauses that I just took about 2 seconds ago, or any other statements or any other words that you insert to make these pauses which are uncalled for. They don't make a pause, they just make the emptiness or the vacuum in your chain of thought. That is what it basically portrays. So you are not prepared, you're either not prepared or you don't know how to put your idea in statements. These are the two possibilities that it portrays whenever you make an unsolicited pause. So the only way of learning how to make the right pauses is that you have to continuously speak and address people rather than just communicating, because your informal communications might not be that useful when you go for a debate, because there things like stage fear or something might drop in, and that's the reason why you have to get yourself accustomed to how you take pauses, because all of us require a breathing space. Like I'm taking a pause every time I finish a statement. The reason why I'm doing that is that I want to breathe once, so that if I'm speaking a long sentence at once, what happens is that I might not be able to stress on the right words at the right time, and that is why you need to keep your statements solicited. I mean, you should not have unsolicited pauses. And with that, the last 2 points of this particular slide is that you have to indulge in a lot of communications, discussions voluntarily. And why do I say voluntarily is because a lot of people in the first year of law, or people who might have just gotten into high school or even junior college, so what they do is that they get into debates. And I'm not saying that this is bad, they get into debates, but then they go to about 2 or 3 debates and feel that this is not a forum for me. I'm not meant to debate, or I'm not a debater by birth or something like that. I do not have the innate skill. However, that is wrong because the approach is different. The approach is different, and the way that you have to prepare and talk to people in a debate is different. Now, if I'm talking to my friend, I wouldn't be explaining things to him in this way by using slides or by even going point by point, point by point. I would have a heart-to-heart conversation, and I would state that these are the things that you require. This is how you have to go about research. This is how you are going to make your arguments. That's all. So the way you have a conversation on a normal day with your friends, and the day you have a conversation in a discussion forum or a debate or wherever you're invited to make a speech, these are different occasions. But the challenge that every debater has is that he has to make it seem as candid and as effortless as possible. It should seem like he is having a conversation, but maybe he's just having a facade. And that is what you have to be successful in. You have to indulge in a lot of communications and discussions for that. You have to go voluntarily. If there are a group of people standing together talking about something, it might be relevant to you. Go and have a conversation with them. Learn to initiate conversations, learn to create a sense of intrigue amongst people so that they actually get into a conversation voluntarily with you. If you know about a particular subject, then let your opinion out and you'll get to know, you'll get immediate feedback on your opinion then and there. So that is why you have to indulge in a lot of communication discussions voluntarily, because that will enable you to become a better debater and a better communicator overall. And you will have a better persuasive value wherever you have to go, even if you have to get a job tomorrow or even get something sanctioned in your college or at home. So this always helps. So you have to indulge voluntarily, stressing on voluntarily again, in a lot of communications and discussions, without which this is not possible. And then you have to watch and observe public speakers for knack, articulation, and presentation. So there are certain public speakers, you'll find them on YouTube, needless to say. You have a lot of debaters, term debaters, professional debaters. Some of them are known for not having a constructive debate without drawing special reference to any person. Some of them are known for having debates, but their political and economic affiliation could be something else, which might not be relevant to you. But what is your task over here is that you need to understand, or you need to know what are they doing in a speech, what is the magic that they are creating that you are not able to create. And that can be learned by staying more alert in your surroundings and by exploring a lot of videos by a lot of speakers. So that is how you are going to learn the art of public speaking. And these are the good habits that you must or you might imbibe in the course of your debating career. Okay, just a second, I think, yeah. So a nice picture of a doggo to end the session, and we shall now proceed to the Q&A. So I'll minimize my slides and we'll address some questions.
Okay, thank you Adithya Nayak for your interesting and productive session. Now I'd like to ask the students if they have any questions, they can either put in the chat box or they can raise their hand.
Hello,
Yeah, go ahead.
I am Shrishti from
Yes.
first year BA LLB. So you said that we have to test our opinion for fallacies and loopholes. So where do we really test them, or how?
Okay. So there are ways of going about this. Now you can actually refer to, if it's an established fact, it will be available on multiple sites or multiple sources on the public domain where you will be able to verify that this is an established fact. So you will get to know about a factual fallacy if there is any in your speech. However, if you're talking about certain logical fallacies about which you might not have a lot of information available, you can always try it by testing it out by having a conversation with anyone relevant. For example, if I'm not aware of how a law operates, I'm not able to find it in any of the law books, I'll go to a particular teacher and I'll have a conversation with him regarding it. That is how I get my opinions or facts tested. I hope that helps. I think I'm audible, right?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. So, Shrishti, I think I answered your question. Have we lost her? Okay. We'll proceed to the next question. I think this is from Shreyas. Yeah, Shreyas, go on.
Hi, this is Shreyas. I just wanted to ask if there are any good debaters that you would recommend would make a good study. Somebody you can study.
Look, in terms of debaters, now obviously debating is not a profession. So
Yeah.
you normally have debaters on news channels. Just hear me out and then I'll answer to your follow-up. So you have debaters like Ben Shapiro. I think you've heard of him. So you can probably refer to his debates. He has great debates. It might or might not be relevant to your political affiliation, but then you can definitely go through his debates. He's a great orator and his enunciation and diction is quite great. I'd refer to that. But I don't suggest that you always go to debaters in order to learn how to debate, because even great speakers on public forums are also good debaters. If you learn how they speak, how they opine, or how they make a statement, I think that is sufficient for your cause.
Okay.
So, do you have a follow-up?
No. I was going to ask you, regardless of the political affiliation, who would you recommend? Like strictly, objectively speaking. That way. So you answer.
I'm not quite sure if there's anyone who does not have a political or economic affiliation. So I think you'll have to excuse me in that aspect, because everyone has, regardless of whether they're politically or economically active, they do have an opinion about it.
Okay.
And I think to answer the previous question regarding factual errors, I think we have an answer from Sir as well. So he suggests the method of triangulation, where you can refer from multiple sources in order to get your facts right. And that is primarily by referring to primary sources, that is the legitimate sources. If I have to cite a few news sources for you, you have the Reuters, you have the New York Times, you have the BBC. So these are certain sources that are recommended to get your facts right, especially in the international scenario. However, recent sources say that even Reuters is funded by opium farmers in Afghanistan, deeming it to be not a viable source. So you'll have to use this method as suggested. You'll have to verify multiple sources, primary sources. Hope that answers your question.
Any other questions from anyone?
Okay, we have a question from Chandni Jaiswal. She asks, how can I avoid unsolicited pauses? So you can avoid unsolicited pauses, first of all, whenever you start a speech, by taking a deep breath. That helps with, however anxious you are, it helps you regain the flow that you have, irrespective of whatever scenario. And you can take a deep breath in the middle of the speech, but that is not advised. Take a deep breath at the beginning and you can suitably state your facts. And if you feel that you are falling short on breath, because that's what happens when you're anxious, keep breathing properly throughout the speech. Do not try to process a lot of information in a single go. That is what I suggest. Yashaswini is asking, what does the word foolproof means? The word foolproof would mean everything that doesn't make you look like a fool in public. So it could be on grounds of something factually inaccurate, or something that is not logically right, or something that is not viable or realistic in nature. So if you have any of these elements, logical fallacies, factual inaccuracies, or even being something unrealistic, I think that will probably make you not look so presentable out in public, and that will make you look like a fool. So I think that is where the word foolproof has been used repeatedly in the slides. So I think that answers your question. Then we have, that was from Yashaswini. And then we have Shrishti. She's asking, okay, I have to share the slide. I'll do that. I think we can mail this to you. When do we get the topic for debate? is asking. So if you're referring to the debate that will be held tomorrow, that's the simulation that will be conducted by Sneha. I think, I'm not sure, Aishwarya sir, or if anyone, Azenia ma'am, would be able to answer that if we have already allotted them the topics and the stance. I guess we have. We let them know on class group. Okay, that will be put up on your respective class groups. You've been allotted a particular topic and a slide on a particular topic. So we're going to have different simulations of debates tomorrow. Any other questions? Seeing none. I think we can take about a minute or two to see if there are any other questions coming in. And if there aren't any, I think we can wind up. Simran's raised her hands. Go on.
I just wanted to ask what the credible sources in India that I could refer to.
Credible sources in India. Uh, I say you stay away from the news channels and you stay probably the primary sources. So if I had to talk about any issue that happens in India, like regards to politics or economics, I would suggest the Hindu, or even in some instance, maybe the Times of India too, or the Indian Express. So these are the papers that I refer to. I think Hindu is quite viable, even the Statesman, but it's a dying paper. I'm not sure how does that work. In addition to that, you can even use the PRS, as Hari suggests, and the EPW. And these are sources. PRS is available online. So if you want to find any document, any legislation, any report, I suggest you take it from the statutory agencies. For example, if you want pollution reports, you have the CPCB or the SPCB, the State Pollution Control Board, and the Central Pollution Control Board. If you want reports, you have the ADR reports online. If you want the bare acts of the laws, you have the official gazette. The ministry websites, if you want, you have the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, you have the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Each and every websites, they do have their own inputs. The Home Ministry websites, if you want to get updates on the lockdown guidelines. So all of these are credible sources. But if you want to read something political, if you want to read some news update per se, then I suggest you can refer to the Hindu, the Times of India, or the Indian Express, the Statesman. I think these work for me, and I think it should work for others as well. So if that answers your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I'd like to add something to the previous question. So uh, Simran asked about sources. One thing I wanted to say about that is, well, try to follow the fact or whatever that you're checking to its origin. So, for example, if it's a law, so try to find it on the Gazette of India where it actually originates rather than looking at news website for that same law. So if you come across any new piece of information, you ask yourself, who is the person who is actually going to say this fact first? Say if you're talking about me, if I said something to the class, then you will be asked if some of your friend, you missed that class and one of your friend comes and tells you about it, you should be asking yourself, okay, so this is a statement which my friend is selling that Ashwar sir has made in the class. What would be the best way to verify it? The best way to verify it is the source from which it actually originated. So try to go back to the source. That is basically called a primary source, the source at which the new information actually originates. So try to follow any fact to that particular source. That is a general thing other than what Adithya mentioned. So yeah.
I think there was a
Chandrika
hand
Sharma, you
raised.
had a question.
I think there was a hand raised before
Yeah,
Hari came in. I think it was Chandrima or
Yeah, it was Chandrika Sharma. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Chandrika Sharma. Being the student of LLB, I just wanted to know through you that what was your strategy to obtain such a good mark, such a good skills, and how to persuade from a very beginner to like in a this stage, where you have already occurred that much knowledge and that much strategy. So as a beginner, I want to know that how did you start, and what was your strategy? Means how did you prepare, like the way you used to do the things, like library to college to other activities? Can you little bit explain to us? That will be very helpful to us.
I'm not sure if this question is being referred to Aishwarya sir or is it referred to me? Because
No,
I'm
sir,
still
I
second.
particularly want the answer from you, sir.
Okay, okay. So I'm
Thank you,
currently a
sir.
second year law student, so I won't be able to answer your question to a satisfactory extent, maybe. But to a decent extent, I might be able to answer. And forgive me if I make anything, a statement inconsistent with popular policy. So I started debating about 8 years ago, and that was primary school, and then we had middle school. So overall, I think what has probably evolved is the way I think and the chain of thought and how I speak. So as we have something called as childish talk and we have something called as adult talk, I think I stand somewhere intermediate between how a child talks and how an adult should talk at this point of time. And that is something that I've evolved to. And what are my strategies before any debate? I am a debater, to be very frank. I lack a lot of research. I probably research only up to 65% of the 100% that has to be researched. And the rest I rely on persuasion and yeah, persuasion primarily, and the rest of them, it's basically how you construct a statement. You might have very little facts, but then if you make those statements itself as convincing as possible, that should help you win a debate. The objective is to win in the end. But if you have a holistic approach, if you want to learn something, I suggest you research better, you learn the subject better, you learn the concept better, and you adjust yourself according to the simulations, because we have conventional debates and then we have modes and then we have MUNs, and all of them are their own ball games, and we cannot actually have a same strategy for all of them. We have different strategies for each, and we'll have to first try out a simulation to know what is the best strategy for yourself. As far as my strategy is concerned, for conventional debates, I've already told you what's the strategy. For modes, it's of course research, 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 and lots of research and lots of sleeplessness. I think even that adds to a motor. And if you talk about MUNs is comparatively easy when compared to modes. Even that is primarily on research and documentation skills. So these are the skills that you have to imbibe, and once you make an attempt to learn it, I think it will just evolve over the years, and that's, I think, how each and every debater has learned. So you start off with something that is quite basic, something someone might make fun of it, but then overall, once you evolve, and if you make an attempt at evolving, I think you'll become a better debater. That's all I'd like to say. And I don't think I'm that good of a law student at this point of time. I have decent knowledge of subjects that are taught at the institution. Whatever I have additionally, I think that is not formal or organized. It's just that I know about different concepts and different subjects. And I think that's all that I would like to talk about my approach. I think sir would be more competent to help you understand the role of a law student, if that answered your question. So do we have any other questions? So do we end the session or do we wait for more questions? Aditya, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I guess we'll wait for 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll end it if there are
Right.
no questions. Okay, there is one more question from Simran. You can unmute yourself. Simran, you can unmute.
For the MUNs, do you consider Al Jazeera as a credible news source, just like we discarded Reuters just now? I mean, not discarded, but called it bias.
It's subjective because Al Jazeera is one of the news agencies that gives you a lot of information about things happening in the Middle East. But then even Al Jazeera has been time and again criticized. I think that's like what happens to each and every news agency. But then we cannot rule it out to be one of the primary news agencies which gives information about the Middle East. So I don't say that you discard it. Even Reuters, you cannot discard the information that's being deployed. But then the credibility and the tone and the way in which they're reporting it, I think you can use your personal discretion in differentiating between what is right and what is wrong. And since that you're representing countries, whatever you get from these news sources, you're basically manipulating it to your best of your benefit. So I think that answers the question then and there. So credibility doesn't matter much as far as it's coming from a primary or a relevant source. So don't discard these sources. However, just use your discretion when you are taking any news from this in order to make it a point of fact that you are going to state in your speeches, be it at MUNs or debates.
All right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Okay, I guess we can end the session right now. Thank you, Adithya and I, for your wonderful session and for your wonderful speech. And I thank our faculty in charge, Mr. Aswari Sharma sir and Zenia ma'am. And I also thank all the students for your participation today. And I'm hoping forward to see you in the tomorrow's session also. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.